Hello again.
Hi. In our last segment, we made a connection that I wouldn't have made when I was a witness, namely that this text in Micah 4 and 5 is the mother text of Jeremiah, which is the mother text of Daniel, which is the mother text of Matthew 24. So it's very appropriate that in this very text you have lots of references to a birth, a royal birth that's going to happen at some point in the future that involves Zion and involves Jerusalem and involves Israel. And because it is the mother text, it kind of explains a lot of things that as a Jehovah's Witness, or as a Christian for that matter, you won't necessarily connect together unless you know this text, because in later derived texts you have a lot of commentary on this and expansion of some of the thoughts, but you miss some of the basic ideas that are there in the original. For instance, the connection between the rejection of Jesus and the future of Israel. It's very plain in this text what the consequence of that will be. But in some of the subsequent texts, you have to piece things together yourself unless you have Jeremiah 30 and this one and several others from the prophets before you. So we thought we'd go through it one more time with some of the details that we would miss as Jehovah's Witnesses. For instance, in this talk about the mountain of the house of Jehovah or Yahweh, your mind when you're a witness does an automatic flip.
I automatically made mountains governments. That was the way I used Daniel 2, and that's the way I use this. That's the way I would use this.
So out of Zion law would go forth. What do you do with that? It's coming from heavenly Zion through Brooklyn, Bethel.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which you don't consciously think about. You just do it.
Yeah. And you don't realize that you're flipping back and forth, literal and spiritual.
Even in this text.
Yeah, because, when you see this picture of someone sitting under a fig tree, and that you take literally, that's paradise.
Paradise earth.
But already I've made mountains something else.
And
something spiritual.
This reference to the nations saying, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob." Well, obviously you can't make that into heaven.
No.
They're talking about a literal place that they can travel to or pilgrimage to. And then in verse 3, what does it mean when it says he will decide for strong nations far away? Well, far away from what? Is this moral or spiritual distance, or are we talking about literal distance?
The swords and the spears, we make that literal.
Yes, we do.
As witnesses.
Literal weapons that have been transformed into literal tools.
Yeah.
So when you get to verse 5, it's not too surprising that, of course, you have to drop the local references, because you're talking about a people who say that they will walk in the name of Jehovah forever, and that's us. We're the only people walking in the name of Jehovah, we think. But of course, walking in the name of Jehovah implies more than just taking the name and publicizing it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's exemplifying his character. And it plainly says here that the nations will one day recognize that the God of Israel is the true God. And then it ties that to a bunch of subsequent events that the rest of the chapter 5 deals with.
So I thought verses 6 and 7, give you the explanation of the state of Israel now. Because it talks about her being dispersed and his treating her badly, and her having only a limping remnant. So this is it helps you to understand why they're not obedient right now. It's prophesied they wouldn't be.
Yeah, it says in the ESV that these people who have been driven away, whom I have afflicted.
Yes.
Now, we don't want, if we're Jehovah's Witnesses, to apply that to us.
No.
But it plainly applies to this lame people who can't even stand up for their God in any kind of boldness, as we see in the latter books of the Old Testament. They don't even feel confident enough to use the name Yahweh or Jehovah in public, because they sense their own poverty spiritually.
Yeah. And we took note of verse 8 with a little translation difference here from other Bibles, although there is a footnote in the Watchtower where it says, "And as for you, O daughter of the drove, the mound of the daughter of Zion," or the tower, of the drove, "the mound of the daughter of Zion, As far as to you it will come. Yes, the first dominion will certainly come, the kingdom belonging to the daughter of Jerusalem. The word first, they have a footnote that says, or former.
So the former dominion shall come.
A first time of a kingdom and a later kingdom.
The dominion that they once had on earth in Zion will return to the daughter of Zion, or the daughter of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So a future Jerusalem will have the kingdom or dominion that once belonged to her.
So putting first in there, I think, kind of helps you not see it. So there must have been a reason why they decided to take that rather than former.
So in verse 7, you have it made very explicit. Yahweh will reign over them in Mount Zion. Does it say that in the New World Translation?
Rule as king over them in Mount Zion.
Okay, the problem then, if you're a witness, is you just don't believe it. And you can't believe it.
Yeah, you just read past it. And you already have in your mind other interpretations for it.
And how long will he reign? Forevermore, in the ESV. And so this kingship that is connected in verse 8 with a tower. This is one of the few times in the Bible you have Watchtower mentioned. And the Watchtower is connected to the shepherding of the flock being Israel. So Jerusalem, Zion, is the place where Jehovah puts his Watchtower, which is an illustration of his shepherding the nation of Israel, which we'll get to in the next chapter about this child born in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
So the kingdom is directly linked here to Zion, Jerusalem, and the Watchtower. Wonderful.
Right.
And then there's this woman in labor in verses 9 and 10. And again, you make an automatic connection if you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Christian, which is with Revelation 12.
Those organization giving birth to. Isn't that what they do? That's Revelation.
That's their version, and Catholics have their version of who the woman is that's giving birth. But most commentators make the connection with Revelation 12, where the woman, Israel, or the church, depending on what your prophecy explanation or position is, Israel or the church gives birth to this kingdom, which then is attacked by the devil, and the devil is dealt with by Michael. So those connections are made. A woman in labor gives birth, and the kingdom is born. And the child is born to his throne. Born to his throne in the other verb with an E on the end, right? He's born, and he's born to his throne, and the devil, as it were, loses it. And the dragon and Michael do battle. So we're familiar with all of that, but it's all connected here. It's all birthed here, if you want to put it that way. That this idea of a woman in labor in verse 10, the pain that she's in. And in the first case, the pain was because she was taken finally to exile in Babylon, mentioned in verse 10. And then it is explicitly said that there you will be rescued and the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. So it's obviously in the first case literal Babylon. Now some will say, well, that doesn't mean that the next time, if there is a next time, it would be literal. Well, let's go on. We have the nations in verse 11 assembled against you. And what is the you? Well, in the previous verses, it's Zion and Jerusalem. Now many nations are assembled against you, saying, let her be defiled. So again, the connection with Daniel 11 and 12. A great tribulation that involves a king running over and passing through, as it were, all the nations round Israel. But then the great tribulation breaks out, and Michael stands. Now there's a connection here with the next chapter. Down to verse 1 in the next chapter. This mustering of troops, a siege that is laid against us. Again, Micah's people being us, as Daniel's people was literal Israel, right, in Daniel 11 and 12. And they mysteriously strike the judge of Israel on the cheek. So a siege connected to the striking of the judge of Israel on the cheek. And then we make, even as witnesses, we make an automatic connection there. And of course, we know what verse 2 is talking about. Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you shall come forth for me the one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is not from Bethlehem, though, but from of old, from ancient days.
Right.
But we don't see this verse.
Verse 3.
Verse 3. What does it say again?
Therefore he will give them up until the time that she who is giving birth actually gives birth. And the rest of his brothers will return to the sons of Israel.
There's that word again.
The until.
Until. So we're familiar with until in Matthew 23.
Yes. But it makes a difference, that word.
And the until here is about giving up whom? Well, if you look at the previous verses, it's the people who strike him on the cheek.
Mm-hmm.
He who is the judge of Israel is struck.
Mm-hmm. Rejected.
And rejected. And then he is still this judge of Israel. Mm-hmm. He shall give them up until the birth.
Yeah. So this is like the later kingdom. It's gonna happen.
The birth, the labor pains of Zion, as they're called in many of the prophets, including Jeremiah. The labor pains of Zion and Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. If you want another chapter on this, look at Isaiah 66, where the woman gives birth, and this again is the apocalypse, the very last chapter of Isaiah. And I love verse 4. He shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, Yahweh, and in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, they shall dwell secure. So here the they is obviously the flock. Mm-hmm. That God himself in Ezekiel said he would have to shepherd because of the false shepherds. He would have to come and shepherd them himself. He will secure them.
Yeah.
And the reason they're secure is because he shall be Messiah, the judge of Israel, will be great to the ends of the earth.
Mm-hmm. And this one must become peace. Mm-hmm.
Some Bibles say he shall be their peace. Or this one, capital New American Standard says, this one shall be peace, or their peace. So he will be peace not just for Israel, not just for Christians, but for the whole world.
Right. Amen.
So says Micah.
Mm-hmm.